Picture this. It's January 2025. U.S. Space Force analysts are tracking 5 Chinese satellites. Suddenly, movement. The satellites begin maneuvering in tandem, shifting speed, changing direction. Not mapping, not observing. They're dogfighting. They're simulating orbital combat. No missiles, no explosions, just silence and strategy. But this isn't the first warning. In 2022, China's Shijian-21 satellite used a robotic arm to grab a dead satellite and tow it out of orbit. A peaceful demo, they said, for cleaning up space junk. But everyone knew if you can move your own satellite, you can move someone else's. Now shift scenes. February 2023, over Montana, a Chinese high-altitude balloon floats into U.S. airspace. Fighter jets scramble. Americans look up. A new summer blockbuster movie plot? No, this was real. And the real threat wasn't floating overhead. It was already in orbit. Space isn't just the final frontier anymore. It's the next war zone. Hey everybody, welcome to Midweek Sitrep, your bi-weekly briefing on what's happening in the world of national security. My name is Jerry Fowler, and I'm your host. Every other week, I give you the context that you need to see what's really going on, all in under 20 minutes, so you can stay mission-focused. Now, this is the first episode in a 3-episode arc about surveillance and space warfare. For the next 3 midweek Sitreps and brief episodes, we're breaking down how space is becoming the newest battlefield, how satellites, drones, and AI-powered tech are reshaping the rules of war. From orbital maneuvers and private space networks to surveillance tools hiding in plain sight, this is the future of national security. Already in motion, above our heads. Now let's get to the episode. Let's get one thing straight. Space isn't about planting flags on the moon anymore. It's about low Earth orbit, real-time surveillance, and an invisible war unfolding in silence 300 miles above our heads. Right now, thousands of satellites circle Earth. Some beam down GPS, some snap weather photos. Some, well, they do things we're not supposed to talk about. And here's the twist. They're not all government-owned. They're not all peaceful, and they're definitely not all minding their own business. Space is no longer a neutral zone. It's a battlefield, just like land, sea, air, and cyberspace. And yes, there are treaties, like the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 that banned weapons of mass destruction in orbit. Since then, we've had other agreements: the Rescue Agreement, the Liability Convention, the Registration Convention, even the Artemis Accords, and UN guidelines on sustainability. But here's the reality. Most of these rules are non-binding, outdated, or impossible to enforce, especially when it comes to military activity in orbit. They don't cover anti-satellite weapons. They don't ban jamming, robotic grappling arms, or AI-powered maneuvering satellites. They don't define what counts as a threat, or what happens when one satellite intentionally shadows another. There's no space police, no clear consequences, just gravity and intent. So how did we get here? Let's rewind a little bit. During the Cold War, space was all about prestige. Sputnik, Apollo, the space shuttle. A race to the stars, fueled by science, diplomacy, and a whole lot of ego. But even then, satellites were doing double duty. The US and the USSR weren't just chasing moon rocks. They were tracking missile launches, mapping enemy movement, spying from the sky under the banner of peaceful use. Then came the 2000s. China poured billions into its space program, launching constellations, building its own space station, even landing on the far side of the moon. The US took notice, and for the first time in over 70 years, created a new branch of the military, the U.S. Space Force. But governments weren't the only ones looking up. SpaceX didn't just revolutionize rocket launches, it made them routine. Blue Origin, Amazon Kuiper, and dozens of private firms followed, turning low Earth orbit into a crowded neighborhood of satellites. But these satellites weren't studying planets. They were laying the infrastructure for something else: communications, surveillance, military logistics. Space became the new high ground. And in warfare, whoever holds the high ground wins. So who's shaping this new era of space warfare? Let's start with the obvious. The United States, still the most capable player in orbit, but facing new threats. There's China, rapidly advancing with military and commercial launches accelerating every year. There's also Russia, a legacy space power, now leaning heavily on asymmetric tactics like jamming and close pass inspections. But the power struggle isn't just nation states anymore. We have SpaceX, Amazon Kuiper, and Blue Origin building the infrastructure for private orbital dominance. Or Anduril or Palantir, they're creating AI-driven platforms like linked satellites, drones, and decision-making. Even smaller players, startups, defense tech firms, they're being handed real power in a domain once reserved for governments. This isn't just a space race, it's a power shift. The final frontier is crowded, and the fight for control, it's already underway. Okay, let's take a quick break. If you haven't signed up for the Midweek Sitrep Substack, now's the time. I'm giving away a free Everything is National Security dad hat to one subscriber, randomly selected between now and July 31st. No announcements, no shoutouts. I'll contact the winner privately. Just head to midweeksitrep.substack.com and sign up for the Insider Brief. It's your direct line to deeper insights, sources, and the stories behind the headlines. No spam, no fluff, just situational awareness delivered. Back to the episode. To understand just how far we've come and how high the stakes are now, let's look at 4 moments that define this new era of space, surveillance, and conflict. The first is China's close pass. In early 2025, 5 Chinese satellites began performing synchronized maneuvers in low Earth orbit. The U.S. Space Force officials described it as dogfighting in space, tactical formation drills that mimicked combat behavior. This wasn't a test in a simulator, it was live, visible, intentional. And the message was clear. China isn't just launching satellites, it's training them for war. Then there's the Jian 21 satellite. In 2022, China launched it under the banner of space debris cleanup. But instead of sweeping fragments, it used a robotic arm to grab a defunct Chinese satellite and tow it to a graveyard orbit. Responsible behavior? Maybe. But in military terms, it was proof of concept. If you can gently tow your own satellite, you can just as easily disable, relocate, or destroy someone else's. This wasn't just a cleanup mission. It was a demonstration. Then we have Starlink in Ukraine. When Russian missiles took out Ukraine's internet infrastructure, the Ukrainian military didn't rebuild fiber. They looked to the sky. Starlink, operated by SpaceX, provided real-time satellite internet across the country. It allowed troops to coordinate strikes, operate drones, and maintain communications on the move. It became a critical part of Ukraine's warfighting capability. And here's the twist. Starlink isn't a military system. It's a private company, owned by a civilian CEO. That meant in one of the most geopolitically sensitive wars of the decade, a tech billionaire effectively controlled a line of military communication. That's not theory. That's what happened. Then we have drones. There's many uses for drones nowadays. Amazon wants to use drones to drop off toothpaste. But in Ukraine, the same commercial drones are modified to drop grenades into tank hatches. And where do most of these drones come from? You guessed it, China. In 2023, over 90% of small commercial drones sold worldwide were made by Chinese companies like DJI. They're used in agriculture, infrastructure inspections, even by US law enforcement. But when war breaks out, these drones become improvised weapons and potential liabilities if the foreign-built systems can be remotely controlled or denied access. So what looks like harmless tech today can become dual-use hardware on tomorrow's battlefield. Let's take another break. If you want to support the show and look good while doing it, you can now get your official Midweek Sitrep merch at everythingisnationalsecurity.com. Hats, shirts, and gear for the everyday listener who knows everything is national security. Whether you're commuting, rucking, or breaking down geopolitics over lunch, rep the mission. That's everythingisnationalsecurity.com, where strategy meets style. If you're thinking, okay, but how does this actually affect me? Here's how. You rely on space every single day, even if you never look up. Your GPS? Yeah, that's synced by satellites in low Earth orbit. What about that Venmo transfer or that credit card swipe? Timed by space-based signals to the millisecond. How about your internet connection, your weather forecast, airline routing, or even package delivery? Yeah, all powered by satellite infrastructure, often private, often foreign built. And now that infrastructure is part of the battlefield. Satellites aren't just tools of convenience anymore. They're targets, assets, weapons. And the companies that once built your streaming platform or your drone camera are now designing the architecture of modern warfare. Space used to be symbolic. Now it's strategic. We're heading into a future where the next war might begin in orbit before the first shot is fired on Earth. Anti-satellite weapons could knock out communications, blind defenses, and isolate entire nations in seconds. Private satellite networks, once built to stream movies and deliver broadband, are now critical warfighting infrastructure. And what about the International Space Station? It's still shared by Americans and Russians, side by side, smiling in press photos, while their governments brace for conflict back home. Space isn't becoming militarized, it already is. The question isn't if it becomes a war zone. The question is who controls the high ground when the first strike doesn't come from land, sea, or air, but from orbit. That's it for today's Midweek Sitrep. If this episode got you thinking, don't let the conversation stop here. Head over to the Insider Brief on Substack and subscribe. It's where we dig deeper, answer your questions, and preview what's next. And if you subscribe before July 31st, you just might win a hat. We're also on YouTube, where you'll find short clips, interviews, and bonus content. Make sure to subscribe there if you haven't already. And if you want to support the show, head over to everythingisnationalsecurity.com. Every shirt and hat helps keep Midweek Sitrep independent and growing. I'm Jerry Fowler, and remember, everything is national security. See you next time. Midweek Sitrep with Jerry Fowler is an independent production of OpScent Media Group, LLC. The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or professional advice. Listeners should consult with a qualified professional before making any decisions based upon the content discussed. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host, Jerry Fowler, and any guest, and do not reflect the official policy, position, or endorsement of any current or former employer, client, government agency, military organization, educational institution, or any other entity for which the host, Jerry Fowler, may be affiliated. Mention of a company, product, or service does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation. Any references are provided for informational purposes only. This podcast does not disclose any classified, proprietary, or confidential information. All discussions are based upon publicly available information and personal expertise.
Everything's national security. OpSent Media Group, LLC.